I've come to the end of my off season and I thought I'd take you through how I've reviewed my season for 2022, the race highlights and general summaries of how the seasons went and my thoughts and feelings about that, what I could have learned from those things and how I'm going to take that forward for 2023. Do stick around to the end to see the highlights that aren't triathlon related and a little bit more about what you can expect from the next few videos. So in general, out of the 8 races that I did this season, 5 draft legal races in the preparation for the Commonwealth Games, and the 3 non-draft races that were basically fitted in and around that, I can't help but feel a little bit underwhelmed. Kind of a season that was a bit unfulfilled for me. I definitely did not hit my targets for the season, and they weren't like ridiculous targets and they weren't unachievable. Just for certain circumstances, they just didn't come through. The 2 reasons for this being mainly, I got COVID in the middle of the season just before the Commonwealth Games, and secondly, I crashed out in Dresden, IRONMAN, Germany. So my season started off in Turkey, in Yenisei, and it was really good. I was in really good shape. I had a really good swim start and swim, to be honest. Came out of the water relatively high up in the field, got into the front of the race on the bike pretty easily. It was a relatively pedestrian swim bike. It was not difficult for me whatsoever. And then towards the end of the bike, I actually managed to get a puncture. Kind of to do with my own fault. I positioned myself poorly on the bike, went down a pothole and ended up getting a pinch puncture. So that kind of put me out of the race because I managed to hobble home into transition and then just was at the back, had to run through a couple of people, but I was nowhere. You're never coming back from that in a sprint triathlon. Moving on, I actually went to Llanelli, which is just down the road from us here in Wales, and yeah, I don't think I got my preparation right for this race. I completely dialed myself incorrectly, and unfortunately it's quite easy to do for me. My profile doesn't really suit the training if you're going to slightly get it wrong. I can produce a lot of lactic acid, so if I'm not keeping that controlled and I'm not testing regularly, then I can really mess it up. But that happened for this race, and it was a learning going forward so that I didn't manage to mess this up in the lead up to the Commonwealth Games. Next up was Leeds, and actually I dialed myself in really well for this race. However, as a bit of a heavier athlete, it did not suit me coming out of the water. And if you remember correctly, I had a terrible start. So I was actually left standing on the start line whilst everyone else jumped in, potentially a little bit early. I mean, the TikTok did go viral and people were saying that everyone went early apart from me, but who am I to judge? But even regardless of the start, and I managed to swim through the race and get to the front-ish, within the top 10, but I just was too conservative running up the hill. I thought I was going to absolutely mess up the rest of my race if I'd run too hard up there, but unfortunately I let the rest of the race go, and then I wasn't in it for the rest of it. So I did have a really good run off of the back of the bike, which I managed to push quite hard. But again, this was a little bit too late for me. It just didn't come through. I think I ran around 17 minutes or around that mark, maybe just under, for that race, which was good for me. I haven't run that speed for 5K many times before prior to that. Next up was Challenge Wales, and here it was put in as a non-drafting race leading up to the Commonwealth Games to give me a little bit more confidence because I tend to race a little bit better over this non-drafting 70.3 distance. And the challenge event was actually really, really good. Despite it being really choppy, it did do exactly what I intended it to do, which was to give me a little bit of confidence. So I managed to stay at the front of the race. Me, Aaron Royal and Tom Bishop managed to get away on the bike, which was really, really good. I really enjoy being in those scenarios and being at the front of the race. So yeah, it's a massive confidence booster for me. I did feel really strong on the bike in that race. So again, that was really promising. And then I didn't quite manage to convert that into a podium. The run didn't really suit me. It was quite hilly. And again, well, when I say quite hilly, it was actually very hilly, and I really struggled on those hills, being that heavier sort of athlete. But still managed to hold on for a top 5, which managed to qualify me for the Challenge Championship in Samarin next year. So that'll be a big focus for me going into next year. After Challenge Wales, I had one more race to prepare myself for the Commonwealth Games, and this was the METZ French Grand Prix in France. Yeah, again, I actually performed really well. I came out of the water really high up in the group, maybe 3rd or 4th out of the water, and I managed to actually get to the front of the race very quickly and be in command of that race throughout the bike leg. I didn't have the best run off of that because it was quite hot and I don't deal that well in the heat, so that's definitely something that I'm going to look into for the next season. Now, the Commonwealth Games, unbelievable experience. I would not trade it for the world. It's such an honour and a privilege to be able to race for Guernsey. However, the race itself, I was in phenomenal shape. The lead-in, I can't have done any more physically to get myself ready for this race. And I was so frustrated when it came to the actual day and I wasn't able to stick in the bike pack, because I managed to make pretty much the lead bike pack. There was a couple up the road with Hayden Wild and his teammate, but needless to say, I was there, I was in the mix, and I'd made it, which was my main aim. But unfortunately, my heart rate was through the roof. I was absolutely spent coming out of the water. Not as bad as I have been in the past, but my heart rate was just through the roof, and I didn't manage to stick with that group, which is quite rare for me because I am quite a strong cyclist. Now, it turns out that I'd actually contracted COVID probably in the lead up to that race, and I was presenting symptoms before and after the race, but I hadn't tested until the day after. So the day after I tested positive, and it kind of explained the ridiculously high heart rate and me not being able to perform at the standard that I thought I was going to be able to. And obviously this is a massive shame because the whole season had been leading up to this race and I was really looking forward to it, and I really wanted to perform well because it was a massive race on the biggest stage that I'm going to be able to present it with. Especially this season. I don't know where the next seasons are going to go, but specifically for this season, that was the biggest target, to perform well at the Commonwealth Games, and I didn't perform to my ability. It was unfortunate, and it's one of those things, but I didn't lose too much sleep over it, other than obviously having COVID. But yeah, it wasn't too bad. I reset, and I obviously gave myself the opportunity to consider the fact that I might not have gotten the training right, but it was quite clear to me and my coach, Luke, that it was to do with COVID and not the training involved. Now, after the Commonwealth Games, I did take a week off with my girlfriend Emily, and we went to Greece, and it was amazing, and it was really, really good to take that downtime just so that I could reset mentally to be able to go again and execute the back end of the season, because the back end of the season I was quite looking forward to, because it was probably playing to my strengths a little bit more, being the 70.3 distances. And I much prefer them because I tend to be further up in the field and be able to basically have more of an effect on that race. I went to work after I got back from holiday and having COVID, so I had 4 weeks to be able to prepare and then taper for Ironman 70.3 Dresden. So I'm now focusing on the Ironman events in the hope to qualify for the Ironman 70.3 World Championships for 2023. That's the main aim in that area, but I then have to go to the Ironman events to be able to do that. So Dresden was the first up. I had an unbelievable run into Dresden in terms of my training. I really went to work. I had the time because I wasn't at work doing teaching, and I really dedicated a lot of time and effort into preparing myself for a specific 70.3 effort. So that's a little bit more time on the TT bike and a little bit more time doing some tempo work. When I was in Dresden, the swim actually got cut short. I don't agree with it because the water actually wasn't that cold. However, it was biblical conditions outside. And obviously I wouldn't agree with it because I'm a stronger swimmer and it benefits me to have a longer swim. But anyway, I managed to position myself on the far left of the field at the start line, got a clean swim, got away, managed to lead out of the water and then onto the bike. I was also the first man onto the bike and led away with one other. We got away for the first, 20-30 minutes, and then a few people, not that many people, maybe another 5 people caught us, and we were working then in that group to stay away from the rest of the field. So we had ages on the rest of the field. I felt well in control, well in command in this at the time in the race. However, because of the conditions and because of the road surfaces, unfortunately I was a little bit too confident going into one of the corners and completely slid out. And that was it, end of race. I was in the back of a hospital van and ambulance was in the back of an ambulance, not a hospital van. Who am I? I was back in the back of an ambulance, going to the hospital, having to pay a €300 payment to the hospital, and then had to ship myself back to the UK to reset and go again, because I wanted to do Outlaw X and then my last race which was Qashqai 70.3. I really struggled to get back from this because my sleep was really hampered, and I was also picking up a few niggles just as compensation for what had happened, and then I was like really struggling then to do the training. So I sacked off Outlaw X completely, which was the week after Dresden, and just tried to focus on Portugal and Qashqai. So this was quite tough, but I still managed to do a decent amount of training leading into Portugal, just not as much as I'd want to do. But yeah, there was still promise with Portugal Qashqai. I managed to lead out of the water again while I was in the top 2, and then ride towards the front of the race the whole time. I mean, there was one guy off the front which I missed because of a little zip mishap on my costume. But other than that, yeah, I managed to be at the front of the race until the run, and then the run was just a bit of a hobble because I'd lost my nutrition. So yeah, I mean, all in all, a really good season, I think, but just not hitting the targets that I wanted to. So that was a real shame, because obviously you're aiming for certain goals, and if you don't hit them, you've really got to ask yourself why. But I think that there's pretty good reasoning for it. So I just wanted to double check that and make sure that I was still on the right lines in terms of my training, which I think I 100% am. I just need to execute, get my nutrition right, and look at some little more of the finer details for the 70.3 race distance. So because I didn't hit my goals within my race season, I actually started to look outside of my race season for other goals that I may have hit, just life goals and things outside of the racing sort of triathlon scene that I could look at and actually give myself a bit of kudos for, because I was feeling a bit down about myself. So one of those things was actually monetizing on YouTube. So it's been a 2-year project. I've been working on it quite hard. Thank you to everyone that follows along on the journey, because you've allowed me to give myself a little pat on the back, I guess, because it's a bit arbitrary in the grand scheme of things. It doesn't really make too much of a difference. It's like monetizing is like a couple of pence per video or something. It doesn't make a difference financially to me at the moment. But yeah, it's just one of those little hurdles or little benchmarks and goals that I'd set myself a couple of years ago. So thank you so much for following along and subscribing, liking the channel, and just following the journey. I also took my first paycheck from Entire. So Entire's been an even longer kind of project. Yes and I have been doing it for 4 or 5 years now, since 2018, 4 years. So it's been a long haul, and we've obviously got a few coaches working for us as well. But yeah, we haven't taken anything from the company because we haven't been able to, really. It hasn't been making that much money. We've been trying to funnel it back through the system and being able to kind of obviously pay the coaches, pay for all of the proper infrastructure around it, so that eventually we can start taking something for ourselves. So I think literally we took a couple of hundred, like literally 100 or 200 pounds a few months back, and yeah, it was again a big benchmark that we've been working towards for the past few years. So it's really kind of paying off like, you know, it's still not that much, but it's something. And yeah, I guess it's another pat on the back for us, or for me. Like, again, that's what this little section's about, I guess. But yeah, it was really actually satisfying to be able to do that. One thing that I didn't really give enough credit for at the time was the fact that I've actually started lecturing properly. So I've been teaching at the Welsh School of Architecture, or Cardiff Uni, for the past few years now, and that's between 10 and 40 students at a time, depending on what day I'm in and who I'm doing what with. But recently they've asked me, or this year, sorry, they've asked me to do a lecture role, which is to 200 students, so it's the whole year group. And I was telling my parents this in Qashqai, actually, so like a few weeks or a month or two after I'd been doing this lecturing, and they didn't realise what I was actually doing. And I think it was Emily that brought it up and was like, oh yeah, like, it's actually quite a big deal, like, don't downplay this. I was like, I kind of guess it is. It was quite a big step up in that respect, and I was very nervous doing it. I did have to practice and prepare for it, kind of like I do with these videos, so it wasn't too far stretched from what I'm doing here. But again, like, quite a big deal, I guess, but not something that I'd actually registered myself. I downplayed it a little bit in my own head as well. But yeah, really enjoying that, and looking forward to carrying on doing it in the next couple of months, and hopefully ongoing, because I do really enjoy helping people as much as possible, and obviously reaching as many people as possible, depending on where it is, whether it's YouTube or lecturing or teaching. I do really enjoy that. I like helping people reach their goals. So yeah, that's just another way of doing it, I guess. And lastly, whilst it is triathlon related, I kind of want to recognise the fact that I did do some of the best training I've ever done this season. Whilst it didn't come to fruition, I've still got to acknowledge that it was really good training, and I did really enjoy it, and I've got to be proud of the fact that I managed the training that I did and got into the shape that I did get into. Whilst there was 2 main races that I fluffed up essentially, or messed up on because of either COVID or the crash, I've still got to respect the fact that I got into the shape that was competitive, and hopefully I can take that forward for next season and actually execute some races that come to a good result. But yeah, we'll see. And yeah, stick with me for the journey, because hopefully it's going to be a really good one. I'm currently looking for sponsorships, so I'm partnering up with some really good people hopefully, and hopefully I'll be able to tell you who they are in the coming weeks and months, and gain a few more, just so that I can actually be able to compete in the coming year, in the 2023 season. And the 2023 season is going to be pretty epic. I've got the Island Games, I've got hopefully qualification for Worlds, I've got the Challenge Championships, and hopefully the Worlds. So yeah, if you're as excited as I am about next season, do make sure you hit the subscribe button, hit the like button, and stay tuned, because I'm definitely going to try and keep you up to date of what I'm doing, why I'm doing it, and hopefully something that you can actually take forward yourself and utilise in your own training, and inspire you to do better, be better, and yeah, have a better triathlon journey yourself. Thanks again, and I'll see you next time.